we usually begin the program with our first segment number one on health, wellness, and lifestyle, our health. And my colleagues that are the producers and hosts of that segment are the medical professionals, healthcare professionals in that space. We have a new member. She's not with us today. She's traveling. Some of you know her as former Congresswoman Dr. Christensen, and she's traveling. So she won't be with us today. And we have a special guest on the program as well. But before we dive into our guests this afternoon, today's question, if you will, for the program and to present it to our panel for consideration: Moderna developing a COVID-19 flu booster combination shot. And the question is, how does it work? Now, you've been hearing reports about not really mixing the two, if you will, or if you do mix it, you have to give yourself enough buffer in between getting those shots. But the Moderna is developing in one single vaccine, a combined COVID-19 and a flu booster combination shot. And it says here, Moderna is starting to develop a combination vaccine for COVID-19 and influenza. Experts say a combination shot would be more convenient for consumers and more efficient for medical professionals. Also, they said they hope such a shot can boost vaccination compliance for both COVID-19 and the flu. As experts move closer towards deciding if COVID-19 vaccine will require an annual booster, one vaccine producer is hedging bets and starting to develop a combination COVID-19 booster/influenza shot. Moderna, which received an emergency use approval for their COVID-19 vaccine in December of 2020 and is awaiting full approval from the Food and Drug Administration, is in the process of creating that combination shot. And quoting one of the experts here, they say, why develop a COVID-19 and an influenza booster? Because these are both respiratory viruses that we have observed really increased in incidence over the winter months, particularly when we're driven indoors. This is according to Dr. Jacqueline Miller, a senior vice president of Moderna, said at the company annual research and development day last week. She added that convenience may be a key to long-term success against both illnesses. So, my colleagues, I'm going to ask Linda, Yvette, and of course, we have another expert on the show this afternoon. And please, Dr. Jasper, you're more than happy to offer some feedback as well. What do you guys think about this development? That's our question for the day. What do you think about producing a combined COVID-19 and a flu vaccine shot?
I'm just really speechless about it. I personally am just numb from the development of vaccines. I think it's hard enough to get the population wrap their head around the COVID-19 vaccine than to combine it with something else. I think socializing that is going to be the tougher thing than actually the practical use. Yvette, I see you smiling. I mean, I'm kind of almost like, wow, Anthony, what a question to ask at the top of the show.
You know, Yvette, Linda, you know me. I'm going to throw the grenade. I'm going to throw the grenade in the room and then walk out the room.
Let's go back to the beginning of the COVID vaccine and all the controversy that has been surrounding just getting the COVID vaccine. To me, it reminds me of the beginning of the war. Because we came out with the COVID vaccine, we said, do not take this vaccine with your flu shot. It is not good for you. Now, not are we only saying you can take it, but you can now take it together. I think it's adding more confusion and more fuel to the fire. Jasper, weigh in on this. I'm concerned of what the population is going to think about this.
I totally agree with both Linda and Yvette. It's really going to be a hard sell, I think, especially this current situation environment. There's a lot of factors interplaying with all this, acceptance or hesitations with the vaccines. But personally, I think before we can even go there, it has to have approvals from all regulatory bodies, FDA definitely. But in addition to that, I think we need, as a healthcare industry, we need to have a better communication with all the stakeholders, because I think we learned from what we had with the COVID vaccine. It was not properly, communicated and put it up there for the public. So I think we should learn from that. But like what Linda said, even considering that at the moment, it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah. Plus, there are, so many industries, or in the healthcare sector, we're seeing this walkout now from the nursing corps, and that's going to be a big part of our conversation. Is the shortage around nursing and other healthcare professionals who are walking out of hospitals because they don't want to get the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
I know in the hospital that I worked in, a flu shot was mandatory, and I'm going to tell you, it was a hard sell for a whole month to get the personnel vaccinated with just the flu shot. So this combined scenario, I don't think they should be thinking of conveniences. I think they should be thinking of how are we going to get the American public and the psyche around getting the COVID shot, and then also vaccine. And for elderlies, or perhaps not, but also the pneumonia shot.
Exactly. And then you look at the amount of side effects that you suffer from the COVID and the flu shot. Now you want to give them a double whammy. Good luck with that, says Joanne.
Well, I think the consensus is a serious one, because obviously there is a general consensus amongst this panel at this point. While it's still in its early development stage, I think the dynamics and the complexity of just the two vaccine independent of each other is very complicated, and the campaign to educate the mass on the two fronts. Forget COVID for a second. Influenza has been around for a long time.
Yes.
We don't talk about the flu because we've accepted it. We've learned to live and coexist with influenza, right? But influenza hospitalized on an annual basis. A lot of people get hospitalized, and there are people who die from the flu as well. And so it's not to be taken lightly. I just think it's going to be like you guys said, it's going to be a heavy lift. Matter of fact, I think it's going to be a Herculean task to be able to convince the public, who's already apprehensive on both fronts, to now say, you know what, we're going to make one single shot, combined shot. And, I don't know. I guess there's going to be enough time for us to really debate this issue going forward. But yeah, I think it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to truly be an uphill battle.
And I just want to say, in the terms of the glass half full, so we have, more time and more research and more study that needs to go into this technology. I just want to really actually applaud the pharmas who are exploring these opportunities, because we have the advanced technology, the biomed technology. And so that hopefully in the near future, if we can adapt as a society and adopt, but also in the long-term future, to be able to see these single jab sources of vaccines that are multi-purposed. Hopefully the technology will catch up to our American apprehension, as you say.
Okay. Well, this is where I make my exit. And before I do, I want to wish you guys a great conversation. I'll be a fly on the wall listening. But before I do, folks, we are live across several platforms. We're live on radio. And so if you want to be able to watch us and not just listen to us, please go to www.ourtv.network. Today's featured live event is on the homepage. So right now, the health segment is the live event on the live TV section of the website. So when you go to www.ourtv.network, you normally hear us tell you to go to Jumpstart. You can still see it there if that's what you know. You can still watch it there. But what we do going forward, every time we have a live event, we feature it on the homepage. And right now, our health segment number 1 is being featured on the homepage. So, and if you want to catch up on the other shows for our health, you just simply click on health, and you'll be able to select and watch all the entire playlist of all the shows that have been produced over going almost 2 years. You know, I think what, 18 months, Linda? Is it 18 months,
Yes,
19
we're
months?
18 months and counting, and lots of great information that is
A
very
lot,
useful.
a lot. We packed the discussion on health, wellness, and now lifestyle, and all in one place where you're able to sit down and either do it on demand, or you can watch the entire playlist, you know, as it happens automatically. So, folks, have a great conversation. And if I feel compelled to jump in, I'll pop my head up. But have a great conversation.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we are just delighted to have you, and excited about the conversation because it's so important on the subject of the drought in our nursing corps within our healthcare system. You know, what's happening, what's going on, what's the nursing shortage all about, and how do we support it or advocate for it, or be very forewarned as to why it might be a challenge if you show up in the ER at a hospital, a clinic, or urgent care, or even your physician's office. So before we do that, we want to make a formal introduction. I'll turn it over to Yvette.
Absolutely, Linda. We have with us today Dr. Jasper Tablabra. Did I say it right? Yeah. I'm like, oh, let me mess your name up. Jasper. I met Jasper in 2019 when he was chosen by LinkedIn as one of the future leaders of nursing, as well as myself. And we met in New York at the Empire State Building inside of LinkedIn. And to add to me, his greatness, we had to choose leaders among the leaders. And these were big time nurses like Dr. Bonnie Clipper, who's the president of the American Nurses Association. We had the best of the best in that room. And so when it was time to pick a leader for the Eastern region, because we split by regions, I'm happy to say that Jasper and I shared the leadership of the East. So Jasper and I also have another commonality. We're both graduates from Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. Jasper went on to Columbia University and Yale University. And he's just so bright, so gifted, so intelligent. Dr. Jasper, we welcome you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, really. And thanks for the generous introduction, and Yvette. And Linda, thank you. It's my first time meeting Linda, but I'm so delighted to spend my time this afternoon or morning, wherever the listeners are. But it's my pleasure to always speak for, the nursing profession as much as I could, and also advocate for our patients as much as possible.
Yes, because we know, and you can give me a correction on this, but I worked in a very large hospital system for many years, and the nursing corps, the team or workforce of nursing, was greater than 50% of our full staffing at this hospital, 2,600 employees. And so essentially, we could not run the organization of this healthcare system, and we were a multi-facility system, without nurses, and nurses of all discipline, those who were coming in fresh from nursing school, graduate school, all the way up to the nurse executives. And so give us a little sense so we can kind of paint the picture as to why this shortage is so devastating to hospitals across the country. And we could talk about the reasons, but kind of give us a landscape of the nursing profession from that spectrum.
Absolutely. So when you said, Linda, that in your organization, about 56% are nurses, right? It's kind of a microcosm of the nursing workforce globally, because worldwide, we have about 20 million nurses, and out of that, about 56 to 60% are healthcare workers, right? Other nurses or midwives. So even if you combine the doctors or physical therapists, they are still, outnumbered by the nursing workforce working in different settings and care settings, basically. So the prior to pandemic, we are already really critically short of nurses, and then comes pandemic. It's projected that in 2030, about 8, 9 years from today, we are globally going to be short with about 30 million nurses. 30,000 nurses globally. So it's really daunting how globally we are really in dire need of nurses worldwide. And even though there are some migratory processes happening, it still does not solve the nursing shortage. Because as you can see, even if you have countries like the Philippines or India or even China outsourcing or having their oversupply of nurses to other countries that are of critical shortage, it's still we're just borrowing from Paul to pay John, right? So
Right. Yes.
really not solving anything unless, as a profession, we could implement some really hardcore solutions to really solve the nursing shortage.
And that's just so daunting because we do hear about the shortage in industries within the technology field like cybersecurity, and that there'll be 215 or 250,000 jobs, that are not going to be filled in any given year for kids who are in elementary school who have 12 years, and if you add another 16 years to 18 years worth of schooling, even in 18 years, we're still going to see this widen. We hear that, we get that information. We don't readily see that or hear that as common within the nursing sector, specifically the nursing workforce. Why do you think that is? Are we just making a grandiose assumption that we will have a body of individuals who are going to take up the banner and walk into this esteemed field?
There are several factors that's affecting that, and one of those is the educational requirements that we set for our profession. There are some countries that would say, okay, the entry to practice is a bachelor's, right? For example, the Philippines or other countries. In the United States, as we all know, there's like three pathways to enter to practice: an associate, a diploma, or a bachelor's. So it really depends on the regulatory bodies of each country on what are the standards and criteria they set forth for somebody to enter into the nursing workforce. And of course, whatever that country chooses, they have to think about the need of the community, of the society, versus the safety of the public, right? So if they believe that the care that their population will receive is better off for those who completed a 4-year degree, nursing program, then they have to think about, do we have enough supply of students even entering and finishing the degree? So it's really, there's no one silver bullet, so to speak,
Mhm.
to address the nursing shortage, even one country, how much more globally, right? So it has to be a decision that has to be made by stakeholders, especially legislators and politicians and nurse leaders and nurse academicians, sitting together in a boardroom discussing all these things, um, and factoring in all these different crises and needs in their particular jurisdiction.
Let's look at most recently, Linda and Jasper, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Mm.
They just let go of 200 nurses who are RNs because they did not go back to school to complete their BSN program. Because now the board of nursing, they're saying the nursing legislation and registration, they're saying you must have a bachelor's degree to become certified in a specialty in nursing. That means, like, I'm a certified research nurse. You can be a nurse, but if you want to declare a specialty, then you have to have a bachelor's degree. There's a certain generation of nurses that just have the associate's degree that makes them an RN, but now they're forcing their hand to get this bachelor's degree. And some of these nurses are older. They don't want to return to school. They're afraid to return to school. We've put computers in now. All the charting has to be electronic. That's intimidating nurse. So they're just retiring. They're like, forget this. You keep changing the rules, and this is too much for us to handle. And so that is an aspect that I don't think they took into consideration when they made the decision that we're going to force you to get a higher education, because there's a ton of registered nurses that were 50 and older, not quite ready to retire, that could be employed right now that you've pushed out of the workforce by demanding a higher education.
And that's a great distinction between a college education, so advancing the rest of your college education scale up to a bachelor's, as opposed to continuing education, which is something that the profession needs to do to kind of keep up to the latest trends and get your what we call CEUs, your continuing education units. And that's what has to happen in the legal field as well. So I think that's a great distinction, and it's devastating because that's not as widely known, so that we could, as JQ citizen, put pressure on special interest groups and advocate for, does that really make sense at this point? Maybe it makes sense sometime down the road, let's say in about 5 years. So we already know those nurses that are coming into the field know they're going to have to advance all the way up through a bachelor's. But to grandfather those and to keep the workforce intact, because in addition to what you're sharing, Yvette, we're also seeing the various news stories that now we have departments closing. We've heard about the maternal and child health closing because there's a nursing shortage. And that's due to, as we know, or we've heard in the news, the mandate for receiving your COVID vaccine, and there are nurses who do not want to receive their COVID vaccine. So what's your opinion of that dynamic right there, Dr. Jasper and Yvette, being nurse leaders yourselves?
I could not agree more to what you just said, Linda, and also what Yvette shared about the restrictions that we put with our nurses to even practice, right? So if you have a demand of, I'm just picking up 10,000, nursing positions, and you have 8,000 nurses to fill those positions that have associate's degree, and then you say, oh, wait a minute, only those with a bachelor's can practice, but you only have like 2,000 nurses with a bachelor's. So how are you going to be able to fill those 10,000 positions if, to start with, you're already critically short? So there's some ethical considerations and dilemma that really comes into the picture there. And that is why we need to have all the nursing leaders to come up to the table and say, okay, what makes sense here, right? To your point, Linda, about the different requirements that we also impose, not education, but let's say what you just shared about vaccines, no, you cannot work in our hospitals unless you're vaccinated. It's almost in a similar vein where we're putting restrictions to somebody who wants to practice, but then again, we don't have, really choices or options to begin with, right? Like, it's like beggars can be choosers. If you cannot have, nurses to work to start with, then how are you in a position to even impose all these restrictions?
Absolutely, I agree. And I'm looking at the bigger picture, Dr. Jasper and Linda. This isn't Burger King. This isn't a Starbucks where you can put in a vending machine and just get a nurse out. You have to have nurses to take care of people. Without nurses, our healthcare system is going to crumble really bad. I mean, look at, as Linda pointed out in the beginning, hospital units are closing. Before you joined us, Linda, we were talking, and there are 5 hospitals right now who are packed to capacity with patients. They can't take any more patients, nor do they have the staff to take care of those patients. So there has to be some type of leeway here, or the bridge is going to break. and people are going to suffer. And it's the people who are listening to us today that could become ill, that may suffer because of this crisis. I can't say that the three of us have the solution on how to solve it. I know we have some really pretty good ideas because, we're an intelligent crew here, but this nursing shortage crisis has got to be taken more seriously by the legislators.
Yeah.
I think that's a real good point, and I'm not hearing that from our top leaders. And that's where that letter writing, so our listeners who are in the US and probably around the world in other parts, as you pointed out, Dr. Jasper, this is not unique to just the Americas. This is a phenomena that if we are recruiting from other countries to fill slots in the US, that might leave a really substantial gap in that country. And then it starts to come down to something very interesting called economics, the opportunities that are there. This new phenomena, or I guess it's not new, but it's growing, increasing as travel nurses. I hear great things for the nurses who are getting their financial due for the type of work that they're doing and being able to go in and fill the gap and get a very good salary to do so, very good pay to do so. But would that be considered part of the Band-Aid solution or a good solution if we had a remarkable network of travel nurse organizations, travel nurses?
Travel nurses are actually a short-term patch or solution, so to speak. It's not sustainable, as we all know. But in times of crisis like global health crisis like this, certainly the travel nursing industry is a great helpful solution to patch what is currently bleeding, right? Nursing workforce. But every hospital administrator knows that it's not tenable, it's not sustainable in the long term. So as early as today, or as yesterday, they need to really think about how to staff their facilities so that their nurses will stay, right? There should be no retention, there's no turnover of the nursing staff. And there are some different approaches to do that, and I'm sure it is not rocket science. It's been in the literature, right? It's the culture, the pay, and the respect that your nurses get will keep your nurses to work for your facilities. But right now, I just heard that travel nursing is actually a booming industry, and it's. I even heard that there are some nursing staff who are quitting their job because they are now going for travel nursing. And that itself is a scary situation because now you have no more staff on board, but you basically are relying from travel nurses and paying probably twice the salary of those. But it's their option, obviously, from individual nurses to travel or and work wherever they feel compensated. But then again, we also need to really investigate on what causing all this different phenomena, and put some solutions to it, because like what I've said, it's not sustainable.
Absolutely. And the one thing about travel nursing is it does pay twice to three times, maybe four times more. I mean, they're offering you, say, $4,000 a week plus $2,000 for your hotel, plus your airplane tickets, plus your gas and your meals. And if I can make $6K a week, I'm out of here. That's what these nurses are thinking. But the drawback is there's no continuity of care. You take that same nurse that lives in that neighborhood hospital that goes every day and works 7 to 3, 3 to 11, or, was it 11 to 7? And she knows those patients. She knows what makes them tick, what they like and what they don't like. So she can look at them and tell when they're not normal. You want that continuity of care. You want the same nurses on your floor taking care of those patients. You don't want to come in every day and it's a new face, because then you're having to retrain, because I may be a nurse, but everywhere I go, they do it their way. So now we're retraining nurses everywhere they go. They know they're not staying. So how much of their heart's really in that, right? I'm here for 6K for 4 weeks and I'm out. Where the nurse that has ownership of that hospital is going to provide better care to those
Absolutely.
patients.
I think that's an excellent point, and we have seen that. We've actually even seen that in per diem, so what we call agency nurses that are hired by a third party and are temporarily, or they receive their salary not directly from the hospital, but from that agency, where that continuity of care and that consideration of family relations is so, it can be lost in that entire process. Certainly there is care administered, but the continuity of care and that pass through can be very, very hampered. I see Anthony, which means that we're at the top of the hour already. Really?
Yes. But before we take a quick break and continue the conversation, Dr. Jasper, did you said there are 30 million nurses worldwide?
So worldwide, yes, that's the nursing shortage that's gonna be, and that's the projection from the World Health Organization. And so with the pandemic, we are still going to, unless we really put in some interventions to meet those shortages, it's really hard for us to meet those numbers.
Before the pandemic, I mean, I've been hearing for years the issue of shortage when it comes to nurses. It didn't take the pandemic to do that. Now, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because when you think of what are some of the most popular pursued careers, accountant, you can't go wrong. Everybody wants to be an accountant. Teachers and nurses. So if considering the popularity of those three categories of career, why is there a shortage if those are some of the most common, popular professions that people are pursuing? I'm a little bit, there's a disconnect for me there. I don't get that. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. If you can always answer the question at your convenience. I'm just curious. I wanted to be able to have an opportunity.
It's a great question. I think we should start the next part two of this segment one with that as the top question. Why is there a gap, a shortage?
Folks, this is the Marketplace Show Reset and Jumpstart. And this is segment number one on our health, wellness, and lifestyle. We'll be right back.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
Now is the time to think what history would say about this crisis. And now is the time for all of us to define our own role. What is it that would make it so that history would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset?
The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
The world's problems fit on three sides of a triangle. It's one versus many, man versus nature, and the unfortunate foundation is long-term versus short-term.
We had already income inequality that was fueling income, race, gender inequality. We have a climate emergency, which we can't walk away from. There's no doubt that the very survival of the human race requires us to act.
Any recovery stimulus should have green conditions attached to it. Energy prices should reflect real costs.
You need private sector capital, private sector ingenuity private sector technology and private sector capabilities to come to the party. You need enormous trust between the private sector and the public sector for this to actually work.
We have to change our economies dramatically in the next 20 or 30 years, and the next 10 years is absolutely decisive.
The recovery has to be greener than any of the previous recoveries. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that the stimulus package, including fiscal and monetary, are much greener than they were before. So we cannot waste this opportunity to ensure that the very precious money that's raised from the next generation is spent on green and low carbon.
We will now start a quite high number of task forces to look at all the different issues, and we will present all those ideas to the people assembled in Davos. But at the same time, we will make Davos very different, very open, to ensure that we do not fall back to old recipes, but that we really look at forward-oriented solutions.
Well, we are back, and we had, as we departed for the commercial break, a very important question that we need to explore, which really is the question of the day. Why is there a nursing shortage globally when it's a very popular field to enter into? It's an esteemed field as much as teaching and accounting, but what's happening out there in our nursing corps in the workforce?
Linda, first of all, before I answer that question, I would like to make a correction in the data that I provided. It is actually not 30 million. I confused it with 2030, but the actual number per the World Health Organization and the International Council of Nurses is that by 2030, we will be 10.6 million nurses worldwide. It was originally at 9 million, but because of the pandemic and other factors, in 9 years, 2030, we will be at 10.6 million nurses short, right?
And I'm glad you made that. Can I add something else to the comment on that statistic? You know, the American Nurses Association estimates, as I understand, that also by the year 2030, we will have over 1 million, at least 1 million will be retiring between now and 2030. Yeah. So we will increase, but we will also lose very skilled, very knowledgeable nurses.
Exactly. And I'm sure Yvette will be able to add to the reasons why we don't have enough nurses. But in my perspective, it's again a multifactorial, reason. And first of all, it may be popular, but nursing, unlike here in the United States, is not much compensated financially in other countries. So, in United States or other, high income countries, nursing is really compensated well because of the hard work that they give in. But in other countries, it's not that quite compensated. So if a high school graduate would start thinking about, what do I want to be? And when they say, I want to be a nurse, then the parents is like, why are you going for nursing? It's a hard work, number one. And number two, you don't get enough pay for that. And you get exposed to all these, diseases and infections. So that's one. The second factor would be, the academia. There are, as we all know, nursing schools that turn away nursing applicants for nursing school because we do not have enough nursing faculty to teach these students. And that's the number one, problem in the United States. And again, we have to ask, why are there not enough nursing faculty to teach in nursing schools? Well, did we ask how much salaries we give a faculty compared to the nursing staff, you would actually be surprised that nursing faculty, sometimes those educators earn almost the same or even lesser than an actual nursing staff on the floor. So if I'm the nursing faculty, and I'm basing my experience, I actually, after I got my doctorate in 2015, I applied to be a assistant professor in one of the big universities, and I went through the process and the whole 9 yards. And then when HR already offered me the job and they told me what I'm gonna earn, I said I have 3 kids myself, and there's no way I'd be able to support them. And it's almost the same salary as I was making like 10 years back when I was doing a bedside nursing, which to me is not acceptable. So as much as I love teaching, and if it was not for the salary, I would have definitely accepted the job. But because of that factor alone, and I have to be pragmatic and practical about my own needs, I have to go back to the clinical setting for that reason. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that experience. There are many other you know uh, graduate degree holders, nurses that would like to go into the academic setting, but because of the financial factors, they would not. So with the lack of faculty out there, we cannot accept, obviously, nursing students to go back to nursing school.
Um, I'd like to sort of attack two fronts. The issue of the pandemic has obviously changed the economic dynamics of pay for frontline nurses, right? While the issue of pay was considered not enough, inadequate, now the pandemic has thrust the demand for a higher pay to compensate, because nurses are afraid, right? Like, they're human, right? And they are concerned, and so they want to be able to choose not to expose themselves or not, even though that's what they went to school for and trained. But the pandemic has scared a lot of people, and so therefore, and it's obviously with the shortage that is created, but it also now you now see nurses, and more so contract traveling nurses, being paid an insane amount of money to be able to fill the gap. And the question is, when and if we are no longer dealing with this pandemic, is the pay that we're seeing in this pandemic, is it going to be sustainable in post-pandemic, right? And then the second front is, you're from the Philippines, right? Correct, Dr. Jasper?
Yeah, originally, yeah.
From my research and understanding of the Philippines economy and education system, they literally educate and train their workforce for export.
True.
And the reason for that is because they know, by allowing Filipinos and Filipinas to go abroad to work, they're able to create an economic bridge of sending money back home to their families. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So remittances is a great tool for helping to deal with the economy. And so if there is a shortage, and the Philippines have done so well in producing nurses, and clearly, looking at the forecast, can we expect that the Philippines is going to become even more so proactive and aggressive in terms of the number of medical professionals, specifically nurse, that they produce? Those are my two questions. I want to be able to hopefully get a response on.
I really, appreciate that you did the research, Anthony, and that was really well on point that you mentioned about those data. To answer your first question about the economics and the demands about nursing shortage and the pandemic, we have to expand not just in the United States experience, right? In the United States, it's definitely true that the pandemic, because we are a capitalistic economy, because of the nursing shortage, then we pay more our nurses to entice them to go back to the bedside and practice their profession. And that's well and good, right? We compensate them because that's hard work. Well, unfortunately, that is not actually true in other countries, in many countries, in fact, where nurses, doesn't matter if it's pandemic or not, it did not make any difference. They still have, they're still getting the same pay as they were getting. So it really does does not solve the nursing shortage in that country. In fact, it actually created more nursing shortage because those nurses from those countries are asking themselves, why do I have to do this work, right? Expose myself and my family if I'm not getting any compensations whatsoever. So those are the questions that are being asked on the other side of the world, as opposed to here in the United States. As I've mentioned, there's a good capitalistic, exchange where nurses are really getting paid well and more compared to the pre-pandemic era. That's fine. That's good. But as I mentioned, that's not the same experience in other countries. And let me segue with the question about the Philippine experience, nursing experience in the Philippines, where nurses really did not get, better pay because of the pandemic. Um, they were earning the same amount of money as they were pre-pandemic, and there were some actually because of the clamor from the nursing crew about the exposure that they have, then they have this special allowance that they ask from the government. But if it's not only like, let me tell you, $100, I'd say about $10-20 a month increase from what they were getting prior to the pandemic. So it's almost like $20 per month in exchange for keeping your job as a nurse in a pandemic crisis. It's not worth it. And to really, add insult to injury, those $20 a month, you will get it like what, 3 months, 5 months delayed. So it's not like you're gonna get that every month. You have to struggle. Your hospital even has to fight for those, or the nurses have to fight for those, salary, expenditures for them to get those. So to make it really, really worse for the nursing context and the diaspora is that all the nurses in the Philippines pretty much like, all right, this is not gonna work for me and my family. I'm gonna migrate. Well, now that the migration is increasing, then the government realized like, oh wait, we're losing our nurses. So then last year the government put a stop to the migration.
Wow.
So
That is a little known fact.
I didn't know that. Yeah, wow.
And then because nurses started to, complain and make their voices heard, the government kind of budged and gave the nurses 5,000 nurses a year to go out. So there's a cap, 5,000. That's not a lot. So now the government thought that they could actually entice nurses to work in the hospitals by putting a stopgap on the immigration process. Well, nobody even wanted to go back to the bedside. It doesn't matter if they don't work, because like what I've said, they are not getting the pay that they deserve, and they are putting their life and limbs at risk because of that experience. So nobody wins really.
Wow.
In the Virgin Islands, ever since I've been a kid, my school nurse, elementary school nurse, was Filipino. Was a Filipino, right?
Yes.
And it seems to me, and Linda and Yvette, you guys, I don't know if you see the same trend. You can certainly comment on this, but it seems to be when you look at foreign nurses coming from different parts of the world, it just seems as though nurses from the Philippines are in high demand. And I'm curious to know, why is that? Is it because of they're better trained, better work ethics? What is it that you see such a demand? Certainly nurses come from all over the world, but it just seems to be a demand for Philippine nurses.
Absolutely.
There are a few reasons to that, Anthony. There's some positive, there's some negative. For the positive side, I think the demand for Filipino nurses, and I got myself into that. I migrated to the United States 17 years ago in 2004. I was a faculty in a nursing school in the Philippines before I migrated. I think the 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 market for the Filipino nurses. So because first of all, the curriculum that we went to actually mirrors that of the United States, because when we got colonized by the US for 10 years, basically that's how nursing started in the Philippines. Because of the war, Americans basically trained the nurses to become, nurses for the veterans. So now with these nurses trained, they learned, oh, wait a minute, we have nurses in the Philippines, 1940s. So now they started to migrate those nurses to the United States, because now they could use those trained nurses, to become U.S. nurses. And that kind of started to that. And all the textbooks, the curriculum, even the language of instruction, which is English, is what we use in the Philippines. So when we come to the United States or any part of the world, we are basically trained in a Western type of education, which makes it easier for us to transition into the nursing practice.
But you're also fluent in Spanish though. Philippines are very fluent in
There are
Spanish.
some older Filipino nurses that are, but the new generations are not anymore. But we were under the Spanish rule for 300 years, so we did speak Spanish at one point. But when I arrived in the United States, actually quite funny, because when I arrived in 2004, a month later, I was talking to my colleagues, and like, oh wow, you speak good English. I said, when did you learn that? I said, we just were taught English last month, and I was just pulling their leg, but but we actually speak English proficiently since our nursing program, because the textbooks and the mode of instruction is in English. So that makes us more competitive in the global market in terms of the nursing profession. You mentioned about the characteristic, definitely are hard workers. In fact, I have spoken to many nursing directors in my career here. Yvette, I think I also spoke with Yvette, and she said when nursing is distinctly one of the go-to nurses when there are shortage. And the reason for that is that Filipino nurses love the night shift, right? They just love to work. There are definitely, when I was a nurse, I would go for the night shift because there are night differentials. I love to work the holidays because it's time and a half. In the Philippines, we don't have such a thing as Thanksgiving. So I'm going to work all those 3 days. I'm going to pay time and a half. So we rack up those, extra pay quite well. And then we send it back to the Philippines. It's just the nature of it. And the American, our American counterparts, coworkers love it, because now they can take the day off for holidays, and it's a win-win for us.
Anthony, I'm going to put this in a male perspective, and I'm going to start a little trouble here.
Uh-oh.
So you know how, Linda,
Instigator.
some men of color say that they prefer a woman of another race because we African American women are demanding and bossy and spoiled.
I can't believe you're going there.
I can't believe you're going there. That kind of woman, because you sisters have
oh my gosh
and all that. So it's the same with nursing. It's like I'll just get me, another type of nurse, like a Filipino nurse, because they work harder and they work better than your model does, right, Anthony? And I'm gonna leave that right there.
Well, oh my goodness, you see me coming close to it because I don't want to get. That was like a. So our dear, wonderful Yvette, look, she went all the way there. No, but this is what we do know: that 1 in 20 nurses in the U.S. are Filipinos, and it may be even higher. That's a statistic of 2019.
Wow.
We do know that there's a cultural sensitivity divide between the American nurse, the African American nurse, and I'm using American as in everything else other than African American, African diaspora nurse, and Philippine diaspora nurse. Culturally. And having worked in a hospital, we had to have an open conversation about it.
Right.
Because what Yvette was saying was so true. Those attributes, quote unquote, were labeled to the African American working nursing, and unfairly so. So just a hard discussion with your nurse leaders led to a different type of perception than a hard conversation with your African nurses versus and your Filipino nurses. The cultural norms and differences were very evident in the nursing workforce. But at the end of the day, prayerfully, we'll go back to the continuity of care was the driving commonality among all of them. But there was some very difficult cultural nuances and much larger cultural divide that truly came into play. And Yvette, you're speaking truth. I mean, that's a bomb that nobody wants to really detonate. But let me tell you.
Well, it's I don't want anyone to say that it's directed. African American men have a preference for Filipino or Filipino women. It's Asian women, right? That's the saying, right? For that same reason, Black men, African American men have this saying that they want a woman that's going to be more submissive, because you're not using that word, but that's what they don't want an aggressive mate or partner, right? And so the understanding is that if they go pursue an Asian woman, the culture and the upbringing in the Asian community, the women tend to approach relationships a lot different, and so that explains that in itself. And look at Yvette, look on her face, like, yeah, okay, whatever.
And Yvette, I'm gonna let you comment on that.
I'm just thinking we need to do a whole broadcast on that.
And I wonder if it's generational. Is it older men who went to war in various countries where there's an affinity, or is that in our newer millennial and our younger generation? Where is that phenomena truly showing up, and is it common in multiple?
That's a lifestyle. That's a lifestyle debate, right? A preference of who you want, what sex, what gender, who you prefer in terms of ethnicity, all that other stuff. That's another conversation. Wow. But the question I want to ask the three of you guys.
Sure.
The healthcare industry and how it's delivered is like any other industry, right? It's a for-profit, right? Even if you say nonprofit, you still have to run a cost-effective operating a business, right?
Yeah.
Is it because the level of proficiency and productivity is why we see a certain preference for a certain type of nurse coming from a certain origin? It has to be the fact that it's the productivity is what's really driving this whole thing.
Jasper hit the nail on the head with a few things. When I was a director of nursing, my best nurse was from Morocco. She did not celebrate the American holidays, so I didn't have to worry about her wanting Thanksgiving and Christmas off. She didn't care about that. She wanted to work because we paid double time for the holidays. She, coming from a lower social economic background, she wanted to work as much as she could and as hard as she could because she wanted to move up through the ranks, right? And she wanted to prove that she was just as educated as an American nurse. So she did work harder. She worked longer. She was the first one to volunteer to pick up shifts and work overtime. Where on the other hand, you do have the American nurses who've been in the Americas who know that, hey, I can get so many of these holidays off. And, they kind of knew that they didn't have to work as hard. They get the job done, but they were not going over and above where my foreign nurses were. I had to catch myself being very transparent when hiring people, because I was starting to lean towards hiring more foreign nurses because I knew my jobs were going to get done and they were going to get done in excellency. And I'm like, hey, woo, that can be considered racism or prejudice, Yvette. You need to hire your American nurses and just retrain them, right? Because if people know better, they'll do better. But my personal experience was that, my Filipino nurses, I loved them. Absolutely. They were priceless.
And that's not isolated event. I have several director of nursing who kind of echo the same thing, that they do prefer, foreign educated nurses, like we just said, Morocco or Philippines, especially because of those kind of, as we all know, with nursing, it's about the criticality of filling those shifts with nurses to make sure that everybody has their own nurses per patient ratio, and nurses, speaking by experience, I also love, you know, colleagues from my floor. It's like, oh, Jasper, can you work the night shift? Can you work this 4th of July? I said, oh, absolutely, I'm going to sign up for that because I get paid more. And because of that, my manager really loved me because I'm reliable. I'm always signing up for those. I'm actually, the first time I remember vividly when I was on doing the, you know, bedside nursing, I would look for at the end of the month when the manager posts the, the vacancies for the shifts. I would literally sign up for every hole because at that point I was, you know, needing money because I like need to you know, send money to the parents. So I would sign up for and sometimes the manager was like, Jasper, this is not possible because you have worked like 60 hours this week. You're not going to be safe. I said, that's fine, whatever, you can accommodate me. But that is definitely not me. It's a whole experience for an educated nurse, really working harder than our counterparts domestically, and that explains the reason why we get to, you know, respect.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Jasper. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We're out of time. Well, we've exceeded the time. So I want to thank you guys for a great discussion. Your contribution, Dr. Jasper, on the program. And until next time, folks, have a good day. Coming up next, it is National Small Business Week, and we're going to have a featured program on the SBA. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.